For me, that one of the things I really believe in and say to the students too is that we have a responsibility to ensure you're as employable and successful as you can be. We want you to be able to say yes to as many opportunities as you're lucky enough to get.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to the world of trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We want to inspire you to develop joy and confidence in your playing. I'm your host, John Snell, and joining me today is Nick Smart, trumpeter, author, and head of jazz programs at the Royal Academy of Music. But first, let's look at some trumpet news. I am so excited the time has finally arrived, and I'm talking about the William Adam Trumpet Festival. In fact, probably around the time you're watching or listening to this, I'll be heading to Carbondale, Illinois, to the William Adam Trumpet Festival, July 9th through 12th. If you haven't made your plans yet, or if you're already there, come by the booth and say hi. It is still not too late to sign up for valve alignment, and hopefully you can come by for a wonderful, wonderful time. It's always a great event, and a huge thank you to Dr. Ricky Spears for hosting this year, and of course the whole board of the William Adam Trumpet Festival, board of directors, Dr. Carl Sievers, Phil May, and I'm sure there's others that I'll mention next time. They do it's a labor of love to continue on Mr. Adams' legacy, and they do a wonderful job doing it. And the event, it's like going to church every year. There's so much camaraderie, and among the people that go every year and all the newcomers regularly become regulars, but immediately get brought into the fold, either in practicing or in lessons or in the master classes and performances. In fact, this year, Dr. Spears is having a vendor big band. It's tradition at the Adam Festival because we're mostly all trumpet players. They do a big band night, and they pick some really hard charts, usually Buddy Rich and the like, and they rotate out the trumpet section to give folks a chance to play either among the presenters or among the hosts, the local school hosts. And this year they're doing a vendor trumpet section with myself and Fred Powell, and I think Ben Strickland from Greg Black, and I think probably Charlie Davis. Can't leave Charlie out of that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I guess I'm going to have to practice a little bit. Anyway, hope to see you there. We're taking the rest of the summer off in terms of traveling until September, where we'll be heading to Joy Brass in Tokyo, Japan. September 17th to the 24th are the dates for that. More details to come, especially if we're doing any travel around Japan, or if we'll just be staying in Tokyo the whole time. We're still working on confirming the dates for Virtuosity Music, our trip to Boston. That will be in October, one of the weekends in October, as soon as we have the final date. They do a few other events with some of the reed companies and saxophone companies, so depending on their schedule, will determine my schedule. I'm the most flexible. I can fly out there anytime, get some clam chowder, and see a Red Sox game. Well, as soon as we have that weekend confirmed, I'll let you know. But yeah, sometime in October, we will head back to Virtuosity Music. The following month, in November, we will be visiting our good friends at Greg Black, Mouthpieces in Mount Holly, and going to the NCMEA conference in Winston-Salem over Veterans Day weekend. So check that out. That's my travel, at least as far as I know so far. So I have a little secret here that I've been holding on to for a while. It's been difficult not to share, but I can finally let you guys into a secret yet. We haven't announced it on the website or on social media yet, but we figured our podcast listeners would be the first to want to know. So as you're aware, about a year ago, we purchased the Ulven Mute Company in Sweden. And lo and behold, Ulven Mutes and Bobby Shu were in the works to reissue the infamous Shu soloist mute that was quite ubiquitous, is probably the word. Everyone I knew in the 90s and early 2000s had a Shu soloist mute. So we have the original mandrels from the mute. We've been in the works with Bobby to get that reissued. And as is always our want, we try to improve things. So we're issuing two versions of the mute, a light and a dark mute. The dark mute is a little bit heavier, more like the original Shu soloist mute, but there's also a lighter version that we're issuing. It's both made in copper. that is a little brighter, more for section playing and off microphone playing. So if you remember, the original soloist mute was very dark and meant to be used on microphone as a solo. That's why it's called the soloist mute. So very happy to be working with Bobby about that, on that. As soon as we have details on, we'll do a pre-sale for the first initial production run. These are all going to be handmade, just like the Ulven mutes are. They're going to be spun by our master metal spinner in Sweden and then finished up here in the shop in the U.S. So once I have details of when they'll be available to the public, we'll let you know. There'll be a pre-sale. We'll give you the links for that. And then from here on out, they will be available to the public. So very excited to reissue that fabulous mute, along with the other great Ulven mutes that we make. So that's all the news for today. Really excited to talk to my guest today, Nick Smart. As we'll mention, he was just on the podcast a few episodes ago talking about Kenny Wheeler. And just like we had Brian Shaw was our other guest on that one, the co-author of the book, they both agreed to have their own interviews. So today we have Nick Smart back on talking about his own life. So let's get right to Nick's interview. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead. Let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Nick Smart is a Grammy-nominated jazz trumpeter, conductor, educator, and head of jazz programs at the Royal Academy of Music. Recognized as one of the leading figures in UK jazz, he has performed and recorded widely as both a band leader and sideman, with credits spanning jazz, pop, and large ensemble work. His acclaimed projects include Remembering Nick Drake, Remembering Louis Armstrong, and Tower Casa, and his playing has appeared on recordings by artists including Spiritualized and Elbow. A major force in jazz education, Nick founded key programs at the Royal Academy, established the Kenny Wheeler Prize, and has directed ensembles and given master classes around the world. A close colleague of Kenny Wheeler, he has become one of the leading authorities on Wheeler's life and music, co-authoring Song for Someone, securing the Kenny Wheeler Archive for the Royal Academy, and leading the Grammy-nominated album Kenny Wheeler Legacy, Some Days Are Better. And now here's my interview with Nick Smart. Well, I am so honored to have joining me for the second time, and this time talking about himself and not Kenny Wheeler, the fabulous Nick Smart. Nick, how are you doing?
Very good. Yeah, thanks so much for having me back on. It's great to talk.
Oh, absolutely. And, when we did that Kenny Wheeler episode a few episodes back, of course, a lot of our regular listeners really loved that. But if we have any new listeners, go back probably 3 or 4 episodes, and we did a great interview with Nick and Brian Shaw, the co-authors of the Kenny Wheeler biography. So we'll touch on that a little bit, but let's talk about you, Nick, and let's talk about how you found the trumpet.
Yeah, well, I started about 8. I'm 51 now, so it's been the decades are racking up, and it's not getting any easier. But right. But yeah, Mum and Dad were both musical, not professional musicians, but a lot of music in the home, and Mum played piano, so I kind of started on that. But yeah, there was a lady in the village who played cornet, because being in England, there's outside the orchestras, there's a lot of brass bands, And in my village was called Toddington, just about an hour north of London. And there was just a small brass band. The nearest good band was Luton Brass Band, Luton Town. But the Toddington was just a village band, and I got involved in that and got lessons through the public music service that used to send peripatetic teachers to the schools and things, and yeah, I loved it, and on the whole still do.
You still do. So far so good, right?
Mostly.
Now, did you start on cornet then instead of trumpet? Okay.
Yeah, I kind of weirdly never played trumpet, because I never did the orchestra thing. It just, for some reason, it didn't capture me, so I didn't really do a lot of trumpet, and I think probably to this day it's why I still feel a little more at home on the flugel. I've always beaten myself up about thinking that it's just a cop-out and all the rest of it, but there is kind of a lot of history that would explain that, as just in terms of a feeling most like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was brass bands and concert, like wind bands, and then jazz, of course, I was moving on to the trumpet, but I never did a lot of orchestral trumpet, which I wish I had, of course.
Yeah. So can you take, since we have a lot of international listeners, what is it like joining the community band, the brass band, and getting instruction through there?
Well, just fantastic fun. I think for me that's been one of the things that has motivated me through this life in music, is that I still feel like a kid when we're going on a foreign trip or something like that. I still show up with that same kind of childish, like, yeah, we get to do this amazing thing together. That's an incredible feeling. And so that was by far the most important thing for me, not the quality of the music. I mean, this was not high quality championship band playing where it would have got very serious. There were some good players, and my main teacher as a kid, Mr. Nichols, he was the conductor. So of course he could then take things into lessons and say, hey, look, this could help. And but really it was about the community thing. So just weekly rehearsals, but honestly, I don't have the experience with that very high level of brass band playing. That would be a very different thing, I imagine.
So you started more of like a community band level, and I mean,
Yeah.
You said you sound like you really enjoyed it. When did the jazz kind of creep in?
Well, the really extraordinary thing was, this, for all of us in music, it's a series of lucky events, isn't it? And they're almost always connected to extraordinary individuals that you're just lucky enough to encounter. And it's not, like, oh, I got a lesson off Clark Terry. That's very rare when that's your extraordinary person that you bump into. Mostly it's just someone in the local teaching community that goes the extra mile, sets up a band and makes it great fun, because it's so much work, A, to get jazz together, and B, to play the trumpet. So you've got to love it first. You know what I mean? You can't start with the work. You've got to understand why the work will make the fun bit even more fun and rewarding, So it was really that. A couple of local teachers set up jazz groups at the school. And then the huge thing for me was in Toddington, in the village. Check this out. There was a retired professional trumpet player bought the pub called The Angel, and he put jazz on in a pub 8 times a week, every single night and Sunday lunchtime.
Wow.
Unbelievable. So when I was a teenager, I was in the pub 8 times a week. It was like Monday night was big band night. There was they're all kind of loosely themed, like mainstream night, trad night, So I just, that really got me fired up and going,
So you started getting exposed to all kinds of different kinds of jazz and hearing that. Any players that you remember that were playing there, or was it all just kind of local people sitting in?
It was all local people, but it was so close to London that there were really good players and a lot of retired kind of pros things like that. And round our way, quite a few ex-military band people, that was always considered one option as a pathway into professional music, is join one of the military bands. And actually, that is what I did first. I can tell you a bit more about that. But there was a lot of those kinds of players around. So it was a high standard. And of course, I was just reading all the time. Like there were blow bands, we'd call them here, where you're just reading through charts. So you do get quite good at the sight reading side of things.
So this all when you were in grade school?
Yeah, up to the age of 18, yeah.
Wow. And what about in your school? Was there a music program that you were playing in?
Yeah. Again, really lucky that it was just brilliant, enthusiastic people who made it great fun and inclusive in the best possible way. It everybody could get involved. It naturally sorted itself out into levels, but without any sort of snobbery involved. And a lot of those people are still great friends, and quite a few are still in the music. There were some people that are really doing well,
All from your little town.
Yeah,
village. Little hotbed of jazz and music. So, and you had mentioned that you had some, music was pretty strong in your family. Was as you were getting older in your teenage years, was it, like the thought of doing a career or being a professional musician appealing to you?
Well, that was how the military thing happened, really, because the nature of being where I was and a lot of peripatetic teachers had been like, you retire if you sign up for 22 years, which actually I did at the age of 18. Well, you can retire at 40 and then you might move somewhere and start teaching, So, and I should also say, I wasn't very good. Like I was fine. I was absolutely fine, but nothing remarkable. Not like not even the best kid in the county or anything like that. So no one was looking at me thinking, hey, you know what, we should get in touch with Wynton Marsalis. He's going to want to hear about you. There was nothing like that. So all of which to say that some of the local teachers were like, well, look, why not consider a military band? You get to play for a living and get a salary for practicing and getting more tuition. So that's what I did. I applied for and got in to the Royal Marines band. But for me, it wasn't right. I wasn't sort of happy. I think I'm not a massive sort of fatalistic kind of guy, but I was incredibly homesick, which isn't really like me. And I think it was my body sort of reacting to this decision that somewhere deep down I knew was wrong. And so it was making me uncomfortable till I figured that out, It was weird, actually, because when I realized I was going to leave, and luckily there were a load of military cutbacks, so they were as happy to see me go as I was to go. And I was like this wave of sort of relief at realizing, oh my God, because, I signed up for 22 years and I did just short of 1 year and then went to university to do music,
So you did 1 year with the Marines, Royal Marines at 18. So how does the military bands work in the UK? Is it similar to like the US? I mean, do you still have to go through like boot camp or training? Even as a musician? So you had to go through all that?
And especially in the Marines, from memory, at least in my day, the army bands would do about 6 weeks. And in my era, the Marines musicians did 15 weeks. And then I think for a very small window of time that I was lucky enough to land in, they did 30 weeks. So we did another whole bunch of military training with a little more music thrown in, but it was still considered basic training, So it wasn't for me. I'm glad I did it, and I grew up a lot, and it made me good with stress and calm under fire, as it were. But
Mhm.
I was very glad to move on.
So what did that, I mean, the decision to go to university, you started applying while you were still in the Marines?
Well, what I have to give credit to my mum there. I think she somehow knew also that if this was probably not a move, and I'd got a place at Salford University, which is just outside Manchester, and Manchester's a brilliant city. There, and back then, this is 90. I joined the Marines in 93. um, Back then there were way fewer conservatoire jazz courses, so that the university music courses were much stronger for jazz and music, because was a higher feed into those kinds of levels. And as conservatoire courses have expanded, I think more people, of course, want to go to them because they're amazing, but it means that maybe the same number of people are around, and so perhaps as a consequence the pool of applicants gets more diluted. But Salford was amazing, and I'd got in, and my mum, rather than saying I'm not going, she actually quietly, without telling me, deferred my place for a year. So
Oh,
which is quite cool, isn't it? So when the inevitable happened in the Marines, she's like, "Well, there is a plan B," and so that's what I did.
so you were already accepted into that school.
Yeah,
Did you, but you didn't know
I didn't
during that whole
know.
year. That whole
No,
year.
yeah,
That's what a brilliant mother. I love her.
yeah,
So you shifted into the academic life, and I mean, did you have a trumpet teacher or jazz
yeah.
teacher
That's
there? Yeah.
when I got things got more serious. I had a great trumpet teacher who was a kind of old Manchester legend called Dave Browning.
Hmm.
But the huge one for me was somewhere towards the end of my second year. I got lessons with Richard Isles, who was the jazz trumpet teacher in Leeds, and he was a really brilliant teacher. He just explained a few things, and I realised even then you go through phases sometimes where you suddenly have a kind of growth spurt, whether it's technically or musically. In some way you're like a greater level of understanding, and Richard just unpacked and demystified a few crucial things, and I massively improved. And really, I say without any fake humility at all, I still wasn't brilliant. I still was just like decent,
Hmm.
but Richard massively like hoiked me up, and because that level improved, I did then manage to get a place at the Guildhall School of Music to do a postgraduate single year, like after the bachelor's finished.
Because of those breakthroughs. I'm curious, what were some of the things that he demystified?
Well, just things like scales and arpeggios, and but really crucially, and I'm happy to talk a bit more about this later,
Hmm.
because for me it's very important, is you've got to connect that stuff to the music. And I think jazz education sometimes comes under fire when scales and arpeggios and that kind of theory is taught somehow in isolation from the music. But if you can relate it and understand how it feeds into what you're doing, then it becomes very helpful
Hmm.
indeed. And you can start to look at a chord symbol and think, oh, okay, that's that family of information. That's what this is. It's not just something you're trying to decode. It's something that you can relate to a bunch of practice that you've done.
So connecting those dots, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, nothing in isolation.
no.
Everything,
And
yeah.
crucially, the other thing Richard Isles did was introduce me to Kenny Wheeler's trumpet playing. That was where that began.
That's the first time you heard Kenny.
Yeah, or even
That
heard of
I
Kenny.
heard
And
of
at
him.
that point, the two of the famous trumpet players in London and kind of internationally were Kenny Ball and
Hmm.
Kenny Baker. So as soon as Richard said Kenny, I assumed he was like some trad jazz
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, I
I
know
was
those
like,
cats. Yeah.
yeah, I think I've heard of him. And there was like, oh, no, this is very different.
the third Kenny. And I was
Yeah.
going to ask you, before you were introduced to Kenny Wheeler, who were you listening to? Who inspired you in your jazz playing up to this point?
Well, this is where I feel like you start to sound a bit older because you begin to talk about, "Oh, back in my day," with, cassette tapes in cars. But I'm sorry, it's
Yeah.
true that i- if you only have one Clifford Brown cassette in your car, you're going to listen to it a lot. And if you listen to things a lot, they become part of you. There's just no avoiding that fact. Whereas if you've got a Spotify shuffle that can change tunes, like, yes, you hear more music, but it doesn't go in at the same depth. So yeah, the things for me was a lot of Clifford Brown, a lot of Miles, a lot of Dizzy, and because of what I was doing, a lot of big bands. I remember hearing mostly Count Basie. I didn't really no one hipped me to anything we'd consider cool, like Bob Brookmeyer or Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, or anything like that. It was
Hmm.
it was real staple stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a fascinating point. I mean, to this day, I haven't really studied jazz, practiced jazz in probably 25 years. And there's still solos from CDs that I would listen to on my drive to school that I can sing mistakes and everything.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
probably haven't heard the tune in 15 years. That's that imprint that you get from listening,
Yeah.
because you have no other choice, like you're saying.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, wow. I mean, not to jump ahead, but I mean, is that something like with your students today that you impress upon them?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think with so many things like this, when you're comparing eras of learning and just kind of social context in a way, all you can do is talk about it and hope the penny drops in some way. But yeah, all the students have to do transcriptions by ear where they play along with the records and things like that. And so obviously by doing that, they have to listen to it over and over again.
Mhm.
But I think what's interesting is what you and I are talking about is not something we tried to do.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
it just
there's
happened.
there's
Yeah.
I've got one story for you about that. This was completely mind blowing. In 2003, we started Gerard Presenza, who's an amazing trumpet player in the well, he doesn't live in the UK anymore, but he was then, and he was the head of jazz at the Royal Academy before me, and he got me to start a junior academy program in September. So it was Saturday morning school for kids up to the age of 18. And there were some amazing jazz musicians in that first cycle. Kit Downs, who's an extraordinary pianist, he was there. Freddie Gavita is a brilliant
Mhm.
trumpet player. George Hogg, another amazing player, came through. And later, Jacob Collier did Junior Academy and all sorts of people, James Copus. But this early in this year, we had a email from this organisation that looks after blind children, and they had this young boy who was, I don't know, 15, 16, but honest to God, he was from Siberia and he was blind and he had 5 jazz records. And he came in and sat in with us, and it was unbelievable. The one thing I remember was we played Joy Spring, and he could clock it all by ear.
Mhm.
And not only that, this is the one thing that completely blew my mind was at the end of his solo, he set the head up. He did like like he sort of set it up
Like a
with
drummer.
like a drummer having owned 5 records. I forget what they are.
Yeah,
El Garner was one, I remember. But it
yeah.
goes to show it's the depth of listening, not perhaps the breadth of listening when you're learning.
Fascinating. So I want to jump back to where you were introduced, musically speaking, to Kenny Wheeler, and I mean your basis in jazz, like you said, was pretty fundamental, kind of
Mm.
the classics, as it were. So when you first started hearing Kenny Wheeler stuff, what did you think about it?
Well, I think so many people relate to this with Kenny and I think it mirrors his journey in a way, which is that for a lot of people, as much as they love the kind of tradition and that way of playing, those masters, it just somehow doesn't, it's not what they do. And I think the thing, or it's not where your sort of emotional, this just sounds slightly pompous, but like your emotional truth or your authentic self, there's no getting away from touching on those things. It's not my history, you know. And as much as you love it and you'd never ever question its foundational significance and importance, I sort of couldn't do it. And I think then immediately at that point, again, I wasn't terrible at it, but it wasn't grabbing me and flying. I was, I was feeling like I was doing a bad impression of it. And I think that's how Kenny felt with bebop as well. And the thing that's really important when you're a student is you've got to confront, am I kind of making up this emotional sense because I can't be bothered to do the work? And then sometimes probably there's a bit of column A and a bit of column B, maybe there was that, but I don't think so. Like I got my chops together. I was practicing every day. I could play beginner decent piano. So I don't think I was lacking work. But anyway, what Kenny provided for me hearing that was this real strong sense, which is something he felt when he heard Book a Little, of like, oh, there are other ways of doing this. When you start to hear Kenny Wheeler, Thomas Stanko, Enrico Rava, especially being in Europe, Paolo Freire, even Don Cherry, Lester Bowie, like there are other ways of doing this that you could explore and maybe they're valid. And that's what it spoke to me about, I think.
And you were still fairly young, right? Is this just, when you were in Guildhall, or was this the?
This was still Salford, yeah.
This is still Salford, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So did that kind of change your trajectory then, and where you were going by that point, or what? Did you just kind of add it?
I added it in, and I think a lot of people that go through this go through a phase of then kind of impersonating Kenny, sort of cliches and all. And I think I feel differently about that now. I wouldn't really want to do that. I'm just literally yesterday back from a week at the NDR in Hamburg, where we were doing a celebration of Kenny Wheeler with Dave Holland on bass and Norma Winston on voice. Nicky Isles was conducting. And me and the other I was like the extra trumpet player brought in, because there's the section of 4 and then a Kenny Wheeler chair down the front. So we were taking it in turns to go down the front, and I'd fill the gaps as we went. But we were all saying like how much of a thing that is, that music is so, because Kenny's identity is enshrined in his playing and his composition together. So even playing that music, you can get pulled into doing the accent. It's like trying to quote Michael Caine from The Italian Job, but not doing the voice. The dialogue is synonymous with the voice. So you get kind of pulled into that mode.
Yeah, what a fun gig though, and
that was an extraordinary week. Yeah, absolutely, wonderful thing to have been a part of.
Oh man! So then, at this point in your schooling, you were convinced you wanted to do some sort of jazz playing, teaching. Yeah. What did your career aspirations look like?
I always loved teaching, and both parents, mum and dad, were both teachers, and so I enjoyed that a lot. And throughout Salford, I'd gone back to Bedfordshire every summer, Easter, Christmas, and been like the trumpet tutor in the Bedfordshire County Wind Band and things like that. So I was doing bits of teaching and really loving that. So there was no question that was going to be part of my life. And after Guildhall, there was a summer school that was incredibly important in Wales, actually. It was one of the first jazz summer schools in the UK. And at this time, it was in Glamorgan, and the people teaching at Guildhall were involved in running it, like Simon Purcell for me. And he said, do you want to come on this summer school as an assistant teacher? And I did that, and that introduced me to a bunch more people who then would say, hey, can you cover this class? Not at conservatoires right away, but friends started getting me to do bits of teaching at Middlesex University and things like that it slowly grew from there.
And at the same time, are you also freelancing? Do you have your own groups?
Yeah, a little. I didn't. The first big gigs I got out of college were a couple of shows. I did a couple of little runs on some shows, but I always had this, like, my right front tooth is slightly crossed over my left, and it would cut into my lip a bit. So I was always a little stressed about the stamina side of things. I've never been a lead player. Again, solid, but not the real thing. And that was always a little bit of a source of anxiety. So I got this like retainer thing that flattened it off a bit and helped. And I still wear that maybe once a week. It's disgusting. It's 22 years old. But that helped a little. But I think I knew I'm not going to be like proper A-list frontline trumpet player here. I need to find other ways to survive with a sort of a breadth of activity, you know.
Mm-hmm. So then what approach did you take? Did you
Well, the beginnings with bits of teaching opportunities came up, you know, the depths or subs initially at Middlesex University, which was really a great jazz course. It was a conservatoire course in all but institutional name, but the level of the students, the level of the teachers. So that really helped. And then Gerard Presenza, who I mentioned, he was head of jazz at the academy, and he got me set up running the junior academy, which then, of course, you get to meet more people. And next thing he's like, oh, could you cover this thing at the actual academy, like in Monday to Friday? And doing bits of trumpet teaching started for Guildhall and other conservatoires. But I did get my own groups together and was becoming friendly with Kenny Wheeler. We became close. I met him in 98. And we were pretty good friends by the early 2000s. And Kenny had a kind of extended musical family with Nicky Isles and Pete Churchill, and more so people like Stan Saltzman, saxophone player, who had played with Kenny. Stan and I became very close and still are. So he'd get me depths in his big bands and things like that. So, yeah, I was playing. People knew who I was on the London scene, but I always felt a little inferior. I always struggled a bit with that, you know.
Mm-hmm. But you were still, it sounds like you were more focused on pursuing your academic career, and then I don't say playing for fun, but, you know, that was just an addition.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't relying on playing for money. It was more than fun in terms of the seriousness with which I was pursuing it. But I think I mean, in a way, I was just following my nose as well, you know. But once you have a base of activity that you're doing, which is taking care of the bills, you can be more like artistically driven in your playing because you're not relying on it to pay the bills, you know. Mm-hmm. And also, I should say, I don't consider them separate. You learn an enormous amount talking about jazz and teaching jazz. If you're teaching brilliant players like Tom Walsh and James Copus and Louis Dowsworth, you know, it's not exactly the Little F and G March, you know what I mean? It's you're really talking about concepts and listening, and so it really informs your own practice as well, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the playing you do reinforces your teaching. It's circular. Yeah, circular.
Totally, absolutely.
So I'm curious, the first time, if you remember the first time you met Kenny, how did that come about?
Yeah,
Kenny Wheeler, not the other Kennys.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't meet either of them, sadly. But yeah, Kenny Wheeler, because I'd really sort of fallen in love with his playing and you know, felt like he was very important to me in my last year in Manchester. And then when I moved to London at the Guildhall, there were a lot of people around who, like Stan, who knew Kenny. So it's not long before you're in their orbit, you know. So the first time I saw him was at the Pizza Express Jazz Club in '97, I guess. And he was approachable, you know, a nice guy. It's not like he was straight away like, hey, let's be friends. Do you fancy a pint? You know, but he was very approachable and nice. And if you showed up at more gigs and your face becomes familiar, and especially if you're there with people, friends of his who you're becoming friends with, then you're just increasingly a slightly more familiar and trusted face. I mean, I wasn't doing any of this for kind of self-interest. It was just what I loved, you know. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, then what happened was I ended up actually not living that far from him. I was 10 minutes around the corner. And so I'd go and see him sometimes, and we'd occasionally go for dinner. And Kenny couldn't drive, and I had a car. So again, I wasn't trying to get close, really. It was a great privilege to spend time with him, but I genuinely didn't mind to just say, well, look, I'll take you to the gig, you know. So then we'd chat and hang out, and we did occasionally like practice. He'd say, come round for a blow, and, you know, that sort of thing. But
yeah, was it ever like a formal lesson, or was it just,
no.
Hey, get your horn out, let's play some tunes? What would you guys go over?
Well, yeah, he took me through his warm-up once, which was all just sort of moving air and this insane range he had. He'd be playing sort of double C's almost immediately, but just sort of huffed. It didn't seem to put any pressure on his lip. It was just like all air, you know, and kind of efficiency. They weren't like big screamers. It was just accessing the full range of the horn and the shapes you need to make that happen, you know. And yeah, we'd play along with like Aebersold things, and he liked putting on the Keith Jarrett Standards Trio and playing along with that, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, I remember trading on Stomping at the Savoy on the Jamie Aebersold, you know.
What fun. I mean, anything you picked up from sitting next to him in terms of, or did he say anything, you know, explicitly about thinking about chord changes or whatever, you know?
Not really, but just because there's just so much to learn being next to someone like that. So yeah, the sense of everything had a melodic line, you know, but he was never like, he definitely knew this stuff, but he wasn't to me like, oh yeah, make sure you hit the sharp 11 here. That, you know, it wasn't like that. But he you know, you could hear what he was doing, and of course, when you're playing with a trumpet player, even if you haven't got total uber perfect pitch, you can see what they're doing as well. So yeah, just to get the feeling of that sound and that time feel right next to him in the flesh, you know.
And would you guys be playing trumpets or flugels or
trumpets? I seem to remember then, yeah. But there was often like a bunch of instruments out on the floor and trying different mouthpieces and all that stuff, you know.
What fun. So did that eventually lead to you joining the band, or how did that come about?
Yeah, we were more and, you know, really we're quite close at that point, and he became the patron of the junior academy jazz department for me. So he'd come in once a semester and play with the kids. Sometimes he'd bring Doreen in, his wife, and they'd just chat about their life and his trips. And then, yeah, I was doing occasionally a few gigs, but Kenny was very loyal. So the sad inevitable truth is that there wasn't a place in the big band until there was a place in the big band, and that meant someone had passed away, So if you go back to music for large and small ensembles, it was Derek Watkins, Alan Downey, Henry Lowther, and Ian Hamer. And when Alan Downey passed away, John Barclay took over. And when Ian Hamer passed away, I took over. So that last section was Derek, John, Henry, and me.
About when was that?
About around his 80th birthday, 2010. So that final tour, the last record that he made, The Long Waiting, in that period.
Wow. I mean, what a section too. You've been freelancing at this point. Had you played with Derek and those other guys?
A little. John I knew well, and Henry I knew well, and Derek I'd met a good few times and played with him a bit in Stan Saltzman's big band. But Derek didn't know me, and I think I was probably saved by the fact I was close to Henry and Kenny. So he knew I was cool, even though he wasn't a face. I wasn't a face he was seeing in other situations or sections. He knew I was there for the right reasons. But he was always very very lovely to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was a legend. What was it like playing in a section with him?
It was genuinely incredible. Like he was so fantastic, and it's that sort of mystical thing where they somehow, I know as trumpet players we know all this, but it's worth repeating that the power of a lead player at the top of a pyramid can make the whole band better. And it's not the range, it's the authority. The range is just whatever is required by the music, but actual leading was. And he didn't talk much about it. If you asked, I think he always treated me like it was a bit inexperienced to be going, "Oh, are we coming off on 4 there, Dick?" It's like, well, listen, because whatever I do, I will do every single time. So the only thing we'd ever discuss is the odd little dynamic thing. But even that, he would lead by example more than direction, and also breathing if there was a long place, just to make sure we all breathed in the same place. But there wasn't all of the things of, well, how fat is this quarter note, or that is like, well, listen to what I'm doing and you'll get the answer. But it was an amazing sort of authority. But he was getting sick a couple of years after that, in 2012, when we did our last Kenny big band gig at the Queen Elizabeth Hall. I was conducting the Royal Academy Jazz Orchestra before, so I got one of my students, who's a brilliant trumpet player and a brilliant writer, called Ruben Fowler, and Ruben depped for me for the sound check in the Queen Elizabeth Hall. And Derek, it's very sad, Derek said to him, because Ruben said, he said, it's so amazing to meet you and such an honor to play with you. And Derek said, I wish you could have heard me when I could still play. Because it was heartbreaking. But he still sounded really brilliant. It just, I guess, maybe some of the intensity or strength he felt, at least, it had gone. I'm not sure I noticed. He sounded fantastic. But he was obviously feeling, by that point, it had a few hernias, and by that point had the cancer as well. So it was very, very sad to hear that.
Yeah, that inner confidence. Oh, that's heartbreaking. But it speaks to the level of player he was to be still sound.
Yeah, exactly. Good. And he never did it all on his own. Like John always did some, and I played lead on one. Derek had, which is, if anybody knows my playing, is nothing short of hilarious. But the fact is, Derek was a thing for like, no, we're all getting the same money, like everyone helps, but he wouldn't deliberately roast you and make the music bad. But there was one that was just normal register, and I did that, and Henry did one. And, so there was some democracy there. But yeah, he was incredible.
What a fun section. And you had mentioned, so you were already running the Royal Academy Jazz Band by this point?
Yeah, Gerard left to go to Europe and join the Danish radio big band. So in 2010, I became head of jazz at the main Royal Academy, and still there now.
And is that were you just asked to do it, or is that something you applied for?
Oh no, I had to properly apply.
Okay.
I was working there, so I was not unknown, but I certainly was never given any indication like, all right, son, don't you worry about this. This job's yours. No, it was not a sort of shoe-in as far as I knew. If they had decided they were going to give it to me, nobody told me that. I wish they had. But so I applied, and a lot of really great people applied. But I was appointed, and I was always good with the admin side of thing. I'm well organised and all that stuff. So I think that they could see that was important,
Well, yeah, if we can speak a moment on that, because we talk all the time about audition prep. How about, what about applying for a job in higher education? Because I'm sure, you applied for your job, and now over the years, I'm sure you've been on many hiring panels. So for someone who wants to get into higher education, what are some tips?
Well, I think you must know about the department that you're applying to be a part of. And I think it's, in a way, everything is helpful for us if we always relate it back to the music. So if you get an opportunity to play with Maria Schneider's jazz orchestra, well, check out some Maria Schneider records, see yourself from the inside up. And then if you know, well, who's running it, who's teaching what could I add to that? I think your first approach is imposing your will down from above. There might be circumstances where that's needed, like something's in disarray and strong leadership is required, but you'd still feel that from the inside up, if that was the context. And ask around. You don't have to be nosy and get in the gossip, but just who's doing what are the dynamics, how much work is there, what's the sort of general aesthetic of the department, and I think just contextually where the department sits within the wider institution, like, is there a lot of collaboration, or is the jazz department like this little siloed outpost where they do their own thing? And just so you then understand some things that you might be able to say that could chime with their culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fabulous advice. And I suppose also, what value are you bringing beyond what's just in your CV, right? I mean, everyone's recorded albums or played with people or gotten the degrees, but
Yeah, I think putting that in context of, like, yes, I made this great album and I got 4 stars in Jazzwise, but it's more the fact that shows I could come up with creative projects for the students to take part in. Because, my job at the academy it's like being an administrator, an academic, and then like a jazz festival curator all at once. You're having to schedule the big band projects, the small group projects, think about who would be inspiring masterclass guests, all that stuff. And for me, I believe, get your ego out the way too. It's not about you. It's about the students, and it's about their range of experience, and what you're into doesn't have to be important. It's only part of it. It's not the driving identity, because that might be great, but what if it isn't? What if you're absolutely mad bang into this one thing, but actually the students aren't feeling that? I think, again, see yourself on the inside and be part of what is there, and then you grow it upwards. you don't drag it upwards. That's harder to do, and that's when you exert those kinds of pressures onto something and cracks appear,
Yeah. Wow. We've talked about applying for a teaching position. What about incoming students, especially on the jazz side of things? What are you looking for when you have a jazz applicant auditioning for you?
I think I try and tell all this same message to the applicants when we have our kind of open days and things like that. You can't control it, so you really can only go and show your love for the music and play your best. And any sort of anxiety about the outcome is only going to put tension into the mix. And it's much, much easier to say than to do. But if you're 17-year-old trumpet player in Lincolnshire and you're like really into it and sounding great, you don't know who's applying from Cornwall or from London or from Manchester. So our decision is the difficult one of who we take. It's really hard for us having to accept who we can't take because it's quite a smaller program. That you're not really weeding anyone out. You're looking at who would work well together and that kind of thing. So, I think obviously be prepared, try and present something that's fairly well representative of what the course does, So maybe not so used going and playing completely free jazz at a very straight ahead course or whatever, think about the foundations and the roots of the music. And also a really easy one is, for goodness sake, read the criteria well. If it says play a Clifford Brown transcription from memory, but bring a copy of the written part for a panel, well, then do that. Don't show up with a, Pavarotti transcription that you sing along with a video. Yeah. They're not the same thing. So be really thorough and careful, because they're easy things to just take care of,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like putting your name on the corner of the paper.
Yeah.
Take care of the easy stuff.
Exactly.
Make sure you dot your I's, cross your T's. I want to go back to our earlier conversation when we were talking about connecting, the scales, your arpeggio work, the patterns with the music. Can we go in that a little deeper? And obviously, it sounds like something you cover with your students. I'm curious how you incorporate that into the curriculum.
Yeah, well, this is really more in my one-to-one lessons, but I just knew how much it helped me to go through these kind of breaking this. Firstly, understanding that chords and scales are the same thing, right? If you play a scale but miss out every second note, well, it's an arpeggio and that's a chord. And then if you keep going, those are the extensions. So just understanding, first off, these are the same building block. It's just one moves stepwise, one moves every other note-wise. So that was fundamentally important, realizing why that harmony came from diatonic families of stuff. So when you're playing Perdido and it goes 2-5, 2-5, 2-5, 2-5-1, and someone says, hey, you could just play C major scale over this. If you don't, once I started to understand why, is because C major scale actually generates, the notes of that scale generate D minor 7 and G7 and C major 7. Then you realize, and I, because of this stamina, this lip thing, and I do want to talk about, I had an actual injury later in life, but thinking, well, look, if I can practice a bunch of stuff which is trumpet practice, but also getting my brain working on jazz and theory and harmony at the same time, surely that's two birds with one stone, right? So I was doing these 2-octave arpeggio exercises, but realize the fingers I'm doing G major, that it's G major 7, A minor 7, B minor 7, C major 7, that you're just wasting the opportunity to tune into that if you don't observe it. So it was mostly crank up the brain a little harder. Like none of this is instead of playing by ear. But the fact is, all harmony and theory is just the labeling of sound. So tune into it, because when you're reading a chord sequence, yeah, maybe you'll hear it, maybe you won't. Everyone's ears are a different level. But if you see E half diminished natural 9 over A, maybe you'll hear it, maybe you won't. But if your brain goes, oh yeah, that's G melodic minor, that's what, or at least that's one of the options, then your ear is supported by your understanding of the music. And I think sometimes we can lose sight of the fact all the great players of the past, a lot of them studied incredibly hard. It's not like they were just winging this stuff, you know. I do resist the criticism of jazz education that this sterilizes the music. It only does that if it's done in a brain dead painting by numbers way. But if it's done by a great understanding, and this is where I think jazz education has something akin to, say, architecture, of like, yeah, be creative, like express yourself, but the thing's still got to stand up or people are going to die. Like you've got to know the theory of how structures are. That doesn't diminish the artistry. It's part of the execution of the artistry. So what I think has happened, as a little aside, is that jazz education and the codifying of the harmony has got really, really good, so that a lot of just kind of bog standard amateur and decent student musicians sound really good. Like they sound nearly like the real thing, because the quality and the packaging up of the information has got so good. But that's not jazz education's fault. That just means that the lower, I'm being very reductive in my descriptions of what is a low bar or a high bar. Like I don't really feel that way about art. But, you know, it means that the more intermediate bars got raised. But it doesn't mean there are any fewer or any more true geniuses. That's still rare. But hey, if more people who are learning know what scale to play on an altered chord, that's not a bad thing, unless they're doing it without listening. And it has to be done responsibly, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And I can definitely relate. There's been some jam sessions that I've sat in where I've felt like I wanted to die. Because whoever was soloing on their 40th chorus did not care about the structure at all. To learn the structure. I think there's some parallels to poetry as well, that, you know, same thing, learning the, you know, all of the grammar and the language to, you know, then have the choice to throw it away if you want in the right places, you know, versus just throwing words at a page and saying this is art, this is poetry. Yeah. Fascinating.
And for me, that one of the things I really believe in and say to the students too is that we have a responsibility to ensure you're as employable and successful as you can be. And we want you to be able to say yes to as many opportunities as you're lucky enough to get. And that means taking care of the reading and the harmony and the theory, and being able to write. Say you get a gig with a pop band, if you're the musician that can also do the horn arrangements and things like that, well, then you're useful. Like that stuff matters for them. I think it's a duty of care and responsibility not to neglect those professional music skills. And again, I'm sorry, but that brings us back to Kenny Wheeler, like this utter giant of a artistically individual and important, innovative voice, but also could go and play trumpet on a James Bond film session or a TV show. that's not the case with a lot of musicians. So he does remain, whether he's your favorite thing in the world musically or not, he does remain an outstanding role model as a professional jazz musician and jazz artist.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're starting to see more of that today, especially in like London, Los Angeles. I mean, there's dozens of players in Los Angeles that are great jazz artists that work in the studios every day doing, like what Kenny used to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they go out and they play at a jazz club for fun, but they pay the bills doing the studio work or teaching. I want to get back into your playing because you had mentioned, going through chop issues.
Yeah.
When did that come about? And
well, the reason I want to talk about it is because so little, I think, is shared about this, because people are naturally, obviously concerned about you don't want to be telling everyone in a freelance scene, hey, I've got this pain in my lip after a couple of hours of playing, because you're worried about the effect. But what happened for me, I'll try and sum it up. But I for a long time did this band called the James Taylor Quartet, which is like a Hammond organ funk sort of acid jazz band. And there's this horn part on a low E. It's like ba bidu do do bida bida do do lia. And on one of these low E's, it was at the Jazz Cafe in 2016. I felt like a shooting pain in my lip.
Oh, geez.
And I kept going, but I didn't like it. It felt serious without being catastrophic, but it wasn't fatigue. And anyway, I came back the next day, sort of did it again, but it was like, and then I took some rests, but every time it would come back. And basically it stayed that way for nearly 7 years. And I was increasingly worried about it. And thank God I had my job, so I was safe financially. And I could play enough to, I made records during this period, and it wasn't disastrous, but I was aware of it. But it wouldn't go. And I was increasingly starting to ask some friends, like the head of brass at the academy at the time, and Ingrid Jensen, like really great friends who I knew cared about me, of like, look, I've got this thing. And everyone wanted to help. But I felt like most of the advice I was getting was about my playing, like my breathing, or, well, try and support a bit more here, or your tongue position, or tension in your throat, like these things, all of which were probably true too. We've all got things to learn. But basically it went on like this. I was buying all these, like that Tom Hooton's embouchure thing, and various other tools to try and strengthen. But basically what happened, thank God, is I was doing a week at Colorado University in Boulder. Great friend of mine, saxophone player, runs the department there, John Gunther, and the trumpet teacher is Brad Good, who was a big Kenny fan. And so we'd loosely been in touch. But I was there with Dave Holland and Nicky Isles doing the music of Kenny Wheeler. And Brad came to a couple of rehearsals, and we went for breakfast. And just luckily, I said, how do you cope with the sort of like the admin and, dealing with emails and all this stuff? And he said, well, I play a lot. And I said, well, look, for me, and this is still true and difficult when you have a job like mine, that you're not playing a lot. But then when you do play, it's often quite high pressure because your job has a certain prestige. So frankly, I think sometimes my position elevates my status higher than my trumpet playing would have done on its own. What happened was I think, just still trying to play in the way I did when I was playing a lot, and something snapped. And Brad, I told him about this pain, and he sort of face changed, and he looked over and goes, think I can help with that. And I nearly burst into tears. I think possibly even I did, because it was like, really? And he said, yeah. And a few of the things he said, I knew immediately he knows what's going on. Because he said, did you ever have like a shooting pain? I'm like, yeah. Because Brad, what happened was when he was a trumpet teacher at Cincinnati, he was playing and someone opened the door into the bell and smashed his face really bad. And so he connected with this doctor who showed him various things about rehabilitation from an injury. So Brad said, you know what happened to me? And he said, have you ever like taken 2-3 weeks off and come back and it's still there? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what's happened. And he said, that's because it's an injury and you haven't fixed the injury. And we paid up and went back to his house and he showed me what to do. And was really simple. And the other thing he said that was so reassuring, because he'd heard me in rehearsals, is like, whatever you've done, it is not serious, because I've heard you. And if it was serious, you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And he showed me these exercises that he got from this doctor called Dr. McGrail in Canada. And they were just not to do with playing, but to do with strengthening these muscles. And he even explained to me at the age of 48, I didn't know that the buccinators are these strong muscles here, and the orbicularis oris is the round muscle here. So they're not the same thing, which is why I never knew why you could be firm at the corners and relaxed in the middle. It's because they're two different muscles. I thought it's just your embouchure, you know.
Embouchure, yeah.
Idiot, you know. It's like saying tense your bicep but keep it relaxed in the middle, you know. So he explained all this and he showed me these exercises, and I got these like little medical gauzes that you roll up, shove them up here, and like do these exercises pushing against them, and it's healed. And this last week in the NDR was a really heavy week playing. I would have said it was better within about 3 or 4 months, maybe sooner. I mean, it was an absolute miracle. So God bless Brad.
Yeah. And this is, you said for 7 years you were dealing with this?
Yeah. And I was asking for help, and he was the first person that was like, yeah, well, it's an injury. Until you fix the injury, it won't get better.
Yeah.
It must have been like a little mini tear in the muscle,
I mean, they're muscles, just like if you're running or lifting or, tennis or any kind of activity. And that's what we're doing. Wow. Yeah. Well, thank God you figured it out. But it does, I mean, it's not the first time we've heard that, I don't know, say stigma brought up about, asking a section mate or someone in the brass section for advice for something that might, affect your playing because of, Bell's palsy or focal dystonia or a muscle tear or something like that,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, I really understand the seriousness of freelance reputation and how vulnerable that world can be. So, I'm not suggesting everyone blurts out their greatest sort of insecurities and potentially injuries or issues. I get that, but I do think more healthy discussion and people who are lucky enough like me to have a different job, being head of jazz at the Academy, I don't mind talking openly about it. And thank God it's better now. But if maybe at least then, if there's more of these conversations, someone listening to this might have a student or know someone who's going through something that maybe knows where to ask for help,
Mm-hmm. I want to spend some time because you had mentioned the jazz program at the Royal Academy, and you don't get as much time playing as you, I'm sure, would like to. Do you have a daily practice routine, or do you just try to get the horn out as much as possible? What does that look like?
Yeah, I still am very disciplined in the playing, but it's just gigs, so I can keep my chops and my sound together. But the thing I find hard is if you're not improvising a lot in the heat of a gig, not just playing along at home, but sometimes that fluency of getting your ideas out without a software glitch can be, can get a little sticky. But I do the Laurie Frink integrated warm up, those things. I'm always a bit of a stickler for routine. So I've had phases with the stamp, a little bit with the Maggio, and I did the Visuti warm ups for a long time. And then Tom Walsh is a really close friend now. I knew Tom since he was 15, 14, when he did junior academy with me and then came through academy, and he's now a great friend. So we've talked a lot about exercises, and he shared some of the things with me that he's got from Gary and Jerry and things like that. So I'll do some of those routines and just try and make sure I've done a couple of hours and keep the machine well oiled, even if the arty bit in the background is not getting used quite in a real way so much,
So you still get in a few hours a day, even with everything that's going on at the academy?
I do try, and I have to say, for me, I found these. I got Ingrid to bring me over. A friend of mine told me about these things, the Buzzkill.
Buzzkill,
and Larry's compression training thing is just anything. I'm not saying that it is or isn't good, and it is, and especially that it is or isn't related to playing. But for me, getting a mouthpiece on my face, strengthening, activating these muscles, and doing something that feels like a trumpet. I'm not saying the technique is the same, but that means if you've had a trip or a holiday, when you come back to the horn, it doesn't feel like you've had 7 days off,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the CTS, Larry's device, I know for my own playing, same kind of thing. When customers, we sell them at the shop, because Larry's a buddy of mine and I believe in the product. But it's not going to teach you the Haydn. It's not going to teach you to play in tune. It's not going to make you sound like Freddie Hubbard. But like you're saying, it really does activate those. Like I've played for 5 hours, on the days when I can't play for 5 hours and get that burn.
Exactly. And you can safely, of course, you can do it in the car or on the train or, and it does just mean when you're busy and life is a bit complicated, you've got some strategies to keep some sort of stamina in shape,
I do have to wait till my wife falls asleep on the plane or the train. That's when I pull it out. John, put that away. Everyone's looking at you, but I got to keep my corners. Come on.
Yeah.
And then let's get a little geeky here for a second. Let's talk about your equipment. What do you, horns, mouthpieces? What are you using?
Well, I reckon it's more than 20 years that I've been on Eclipse instruments. And Lee McKinney, do you know Lee?
Oh, yeah. What a sweet gentleman he is. I love Lee.
Lee grew up in the same area as me. My mum even taught Lee at school.
Oh, how cool.
And I just I'm a big people person. And for me, I love the fact we have this history. I can go to him and ask what I need and what I want. And we've got a long past together. So I'm happy. I know that other people will get into the details of what is or isn't a slightly more resonant blah and a more free-flowing blah. And they're probably right. But I feel like my level of trumpet playing would probably top out at whatever the level of the best horns is anyway. I think if you're incredibly good and busy, you can probably feel those differences. Whereas I've always, as you could tell, like fairly self-deprecating in it, but it's not kind of fake humility. I do feel that way, but I always feel like I'm sure it's probably just I should practice more if something's not quite in tune or whatever. So I love Lee and I love those Eclipses and that flugel there was Kenny Wheeler's flugel. That was his last one when he had an Eclipse, and I went up to see Lee and Mark Wheeler, Kenny's son, was there, and Henry Lowther, and I have my flugel, which was the same. And we were all meeting there, and they sort of presented me with that and said, we think you should have this. And it was just a straight swap for mine, you know.
How cool. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Mouthpieces.
I'm on GRs. Again, I think before I fixed my lip, I'd been on Warburton for years, and I didn't know at that point what was wrong, and if there was something that was be more comfortable, or, you know, had I realized it was an injury and I needed to fix it. But Tom and everyone were playing these GRs, and I liked the look of them and the feel and the sound. So I got a 66 something trumpet and a 65 something flugel, because they didn't have any 66s. But I'm used to it now.
And it works. Funny. I mean, we always knew we were at a ITG, at the International Trumpet Guild conferences, because Lee and Bob Reeves would find each other and go out for a pint on the first day of the setup. They were good friends, and they always looked for each other. And, you know, unfortunately,
Fantastic.
well, I think stopped going for a while, or didn't go for a year, and then Bob, as he got older and had health issues, stopped going, and Lee would search us out. Where's Bob? We got to get our pint. You know, you'll get a pint of Guinness or whatever was on draft. So
Excellent.
yeah.
No,
Well,
that's great.
please give him our regards next time you see Lee. It's been too long. Yeah.
I'm due a visit there. Yeah, and I may even look at new trumpets, because I think I got mine in 2013, so it may be things have moved on a bit, and I'm always looking to be a bit more comfortable on the trumpet, because I'm such a flugel guy, you know. So I might open that can of worms now the Kenny Wheeler book's finished and all that. I've got a bit more time, you know.
Yeah. Never hurts to try, says the mouthpiece maker. Vested interest in people trying equipment. And I know you've been traveling all over the place. Any projects coming up? Any thing you want? You just mentioned you just finished the book last year again, and point folks back to the couple episodes where we talk more in depth about that. But anything in the pipeline?
Well, I think I've got some, gigs and things coming up. I'm actually going to Mongolia next week to the International Association of the Schools of Jazz. Danilo Perez is the artist in residence. Paul Tynan's going to be there. You know Paul, great trumpet player from Canada.
Yeah, know of him. Haven't met him.
So that's going to be a nice trip, and then some different gigs over the summer. But this last couple of Kenny Wheeler things, we did these psalms. He set these psalms to music. And a great Italian pianist, Glauco Venier, he kind of put this project back together. So I think that's something that we should look to record in the future. And so, there's ongoing projects, and I guess maybe getting something of my own going again now I have the space.
Now that the book's done.
Exactly.
And then what's the best way for folks to find out what's going on? Website, social media?
Social media, really. I just found, I know I should do better, but I just found the website too onerous to kind of update. So I kept the email address, the nick@nicksmart.co.uk email address, but I just let the actual page go dormant. It got so complicated having to have like GDPR compliance and security. It's like, I don't even know what any of this is. So I think Instagram and Facebook and those things they kind of do the job. If I ever need to do better than that, I will revisit it,
Okay. And we'll have the links to all those, as well as we'll have the links to where they can get you the Kenny Wheeler biography. Nick, absolute pleasure to have you on for the second time. This is fun. We could do this all day. I love it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
And I wish I could join you in Mongolia. That's been on my bucket list. Yeah, what a beautiful country, and maybe hear some throat singing, some Tuvan throat singing out there while you're there.
Absolutely. And you could probably tell I'm kind of a bird photographer. So there's bound to be some interesting things out there.
Bringing a camera with you, I hope.
I will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe instead of a trumpet.
um, before I let you go, the infamous last question: if you could leave our listeners with your best piece of advice, it could be about anything, not necessarily limited to jazz or trumpet. What would that be?
Well, I'm going to say something about jazz trumpet playing, which
Okay.
is there's an artist here called Grayson Perry, and he once said this great thing I just saw on a TV documentary with him about if painting was perfect, like if you could paint something perfectly, it would look like a photograph. So therefore, your flaws are they are the things that make up your artistic identity. So I feel like be kind to yourself, like do the work, do the homework, but you must understand that sometimes some of the things you hear in yourself that you don't like are actually the truest things about you, and other people don't hear them the way you do. And so don't be too quick to iron out all of your individuality in the search for something sort of quote unquote perfect, because actually that type of perfection can be a little sterile, and your musical expression is supposed to reflect the full breadth of your humanity, and that's complicated. It has corners, it has flaws, it has rough edges and smooth sides in different parts and with different moods. So don't be too quick to kind of iron everything out and be so-called perfect. Like live with who you are and just deepen that.
Well, Nick, absolutely brilliant advice. Thank you so much for the conversation. I love the discussion. I can't wait to visit you for a pint and maybe some fish and chips one day.
Absolutely. No, it'd be great to have you over. And yeah, thanks so much for this. And as I said last time, just for all you're doing for the brass community with the podcast and everything else. So yeah, what a pleasure, and see you again.
Absolute honor. Thank you. Fabulous having Nick talk about his career and the different twists and turns that it took, the things he knew he wanted to do or was certainly good at, like the teaching side of things, but also the limitations I was talking about in his very humble way, that he wasn't the strong, powerful lead player, but would step in when needed. But his jazz playing is fabulous. Please check out his albums that he has released. Go back and listen to the Kenny Wheeler episode if you haven't. Lots of great information on Kenny and his life and the book he has available. And we'll have the links to Nick's social media so you can find out where he's traveling and what he's doing, because I'm sure he's got some more projects in the pipeline that we'll all want to know about. So thanks again, Nick, for the fabulous conversation. Can't wait to have fish and chips and maybe a pint with you next time I'm over on that side of the pond. We have some fabulous guests coming up pretty soon. Hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. You guys have been following instructions. It's great. Our metrics are up, so to speak, on YouTube. We're getting more views every episode, and we're getting more comments. A lot of you commented on Gabe Johnson's episode. In fact, we had Gabe's old high school band director chime in, and a lot of you really liked Gabe's when he was honest about the Arbans book, so to speak. Things we have to do and will do, but certainly not things we look forward to doing and having fun and playing. A lot of that resonated, no pun intended, with you guys. So keep on listening, give us that thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next episode. Till then, let's go out and make some music.